Welcome, everyone. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Aloud. We are still we're coming close to the end of season 3. We have over 175 episodes, and I am always so grateful to meet new authors because it means I get to buy more books. Today, Adam Dompierre is here to read for us. He is a new to me author, so I'm super excited to have you on the program, Adam. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
You are an English teacher,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So you have experience teaching sixth through high school, sixth grade through high school. What is the most challenging piece about teaching English to children?
Um, I think we try to keep things moving as far as attention spans. We're competing with things like TikTok and YouTube and
Mm,
all sorts of technology that even when I started teaching wasn't around so much. So uh, just to keep that fast-paced, kind of student-centered environment, keep the engagement levels up, the enthusiasm. You're always
yeah.
you're always kind of putting on a show out there.
Yeah, it's not really a blame, but I hold Sesame Street responsible
Okay.
because the whole program, I mean, as great, I love Sesame Street. I'm a Muppet weirdo from way back, but they did everything in little tiny sound bites.
Yeah.
And I think that has developed over time, and that's kind of now how kids are programmed to learn. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It just is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Keeps us on our toes for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You as a teacher, it keeps you on your toes for sure.
No doubt. Yeah.
Adam is a mystery author with a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Michigan and a master's degree in education from Augustana University. He has worked as a secondary English teacher since 2010. Adam lives in northern Michigan with his fiancée Riley, their dog Pilot, and their cat Max. I'm so glad you told me their names because this is important information for me.
Absolutely.
And in his free time, he enjoys playing guitar and tennis, though not simultaneously, although that would be a trick I would pay to
Maybe
see.
someday. Yeah.
I would like to see you do both of those
Maybe someday.
simultaneously.
Yeah. Yeah. Give it a
That would
shot.
be fun. What part of the UP do you live in? East or west side?
Kind of central. If you know where Marquette is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I teach at Marquette. So
Oh, that's awesome.
right
So,
on Lake Superior.
so you get to see our beautiful, beautiful lake every day. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Right outside the school. It's great.
There's not a better view than that.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, and there's not a better view than Lake Superior.
Love it.
Absolutely. So give us a little backstory for your book, Wild Bolts Electric. We talked in the green room. This is a mystery with a kick. So
Yeah.
tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about the backstory of this book.
That's a great way to say that. I love that phrase.
You can use
My,
it.
I will. Thank you. My favorite books to read, I read all sorts of stuff, but I really like the old 1930s, 1940s, Raymond Chandler, Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, detective stories, the hard-boiled noir genre. So I've taken that. It's like updated. This story is set in modern times, like that neo-noir. But combine that with one of my other favorite genres, which is like the paranormal, X-Files, Twilight Zone, supernatural, paranormal type of genre. So our detective is dealing with a case where there's this dangerous visitor shows up at his client's place of work, and he's got to figure out what's going on with this person who seems to have some supernatural abilities and is doing some extraordinary um, abilities in addition to figuring out the mystery of what's going on with with this person.
That's pretty cool. I'm really excited to read this. I loved your cover.
Oh, thank you.
I thought the cover was really striking, really got my attention. So I'm
Yeah,
really
they have a
interested.
great cover artist. Shout out Tim Gould, designed that cover, and kind of went back and forth, workshopped a lot of ideas. Really happy with how it came out.
Absolutely. It's a great cover. So yeah, tell
Thank
him we
you.
like his cover.
I will for sure.
So you're going to read a little bit from Wild Bolt's Electric. Are you starting at the beginning or are you jumping us into a scene in the middle of the action?
We're jumping into the middle here. So,
Awesome.
yeah, the detective I mentioned, his name is Victor Drake. He has followed a few leads, and he ends up at a local university where a professor says, "I want to talk to you, but I can't do it here." So they have agreed to rendezvous at this bar out in the middle of the woods, away from anybody who might be listening in. And Drake is trying to get to the bottom of what's going on with his case here. There's kind of a lot of names in this chapter. Don't worry about it.
Awesome.
It'll make sense in context. But
Sure.
to figure out, why this person has shown up and is going after his client that has hired him.
Super fun. As I've said on this program multiple times, I am a 6-year-old recovering book addict. So I love it when people read out loud to me. I'm looking forward to hearing your story. Please, when you're ready, take the microphone and read aloud.
All right, thank you. So this is chapter 13. The Blue Valentine was well outside the city, and Drake drove over half an hour into the woods before finding the address Dr. Fox gave him. The bar itself was surrounded by towering pines that blocked out what light the setting sun gave off. He pulled into the small dirt parking lot, gravel crinkling under his tires, and took his keys out of the ignition. 2 well-used pickup trucks were off to his left, 20 years old if they were a day. Nothing he figured would belong to Dr. Fox. The only other vehicle he could see was a black Triumph motorcycle, parked off on its own at the far end of the lot. He made note of the rustic sign, nothing put on about that look. A weathered blue heart with solid block letters carved across its face. Quick scan of the surroundings revealed nothing else of much interest. Drake walked through the door and into the establishment. He stepped into dim lighting and the sound of country music, George Jones maybe, though he couldn't swear to it, playing from a jukebox standing against the wall. The whole decor was retro, if that's what one could call it, not as a result of keeping up with cycling trends, but rather by standing steadfast until the styles looped around again to find themselves back in fashion. Old Budweiser and Miller Lite signs with a shotgun hanging between them behind the bar, which held an array of hard liquors and the basic domestic beers on tap. The bartender was a wiry old man, dressed in a black and orange flannel and a scratchy white beard. He glanced up as Drake entered and then returned his attention to the baseball game playing on an old CRT television. The tables and booths were empty, so Drake sidled up to the bar and nodded to the other 2 old-timers who were drinking there. They didn't pay him any mind and continued their conversation, too low to make any of it out. He arrived early, planned it that way, and didn't count on seeing Dr. Fox come through for a while. The liquor bottles stood up like soldiers, and Drake studied them. He silently appreciated the way the running lights played off them, shining like little stars reflected in the mirrors behind them. The bartender still hadn't given him any attention, so he raised his hand and asked, "Can I get a whiskey over here?" The old man turned his head but kept an eye on the TV. "What kind?" "Make it a white horse. Double. Neat." Reluctantly turning away from the screen, the bartender pivoted and pulled a bottle out of the line. "Know your stuff, huh?" "No," Drake said, taking the glass. "Just like the name." He passed a bill across the bar and waved off his change when offered. The bartender took another look toward the baseball game, but decided his new visitor was more interesting. "Haven't seen you in here before," he said casually while grabbing a rag to wipe down the bar. "First time," Drake agreed. "Nice place." He nodded. "Well, thank you. Mostly just a regular crowd these days, but I don't mind that too much. Keeps me busy." "Your place, then?" "Has been for 38 years," the man said. "I can tell you I take no small amount of pride in that. Ups, downs, whatever changes in the world, the Blue Valentine sees her way through." "Well, cheers to that." Drake raised his glass. "How's the ball game going?" "Ah, hell. The Orioles never did know what they were doing. But I'm dumb enough to keep watching them, so which one of us is the real problem?" Drake smiled. "Not since Ripken, anyway, but he's been gone since what? Has to be 2000? "Oh, Cal, now he was a ball player," he said, returning the smile. "I went up to a game in Camden once. They were playing the Athletics. Hell, had to be the early 80s. You remember Oakland had some good teams in those days." Drake didn't remember, not really, but was content to go along for the ride. Now, Baltimore was still a year away at that point, but even then we knew Cal was special. Well, it was early in the game, 3rd inning maybe, and we're down. The A's, they jumped out to a quick lead, as I recall. But Cal comes up and he's got a man on base. Pitcher zooms one down the middle and crack. Boy, you should have heard the sound of that bat on the ball. I mean, he just hammered it up into the air. It was a night game. And once that thing lifted off, you just lost sight of it. Like that. He snapped his fingers. Off to the stars. He would have been just a kid then, starting out. Sure he was. Didn't matter. He was poetry that night. I swear he had a hit every time he came up to the plate. The Orioles pulled ahead then, but Cal wasn't done. Next time he comes up to bat, same pitcher, and whack, he hits another one out. Right up into the night sky, crowd going wild. Knew I was watching something special then. Called down to the two men on the other side of the bar. You guys remember that O's game we went to when Cal hit 2 home runs? The men nodded and voiced their agreement. Oh, sure, Danny. That Cal was something else, wasn't he? Wasn't he a ball player? Danny smiled and returned his attention to Drake. We used to go to a lot of the games, me and Terry and Fred down there. Not lately, though. Drake sipped his drink. Ticket prices, parking, traffic on the way back. I don't blame you. A shame some things can't stay the way they were. Well, that's the nature of it, isn't it? What brings you in anyway? Like I say, mostly just a regular crowd these days. Friend recommended it to me, Drake said. You know Dr. Fox? A doctor. If anybody comes in here that's a doctor, I sure don't know about it. Not a medical doctor, a PhD. Works at Dompierre University. No recognition. Bigger guy, white beard. Kinda looks like Santa Claus. Light came on. Howie, you mean? Haven't seen much of him lately. But sure, he would come in once in a while, watch the ball games in the summer. He recommended it, huh? Said it would be a good place to meet. Drake checked his watch. Should be any minute, I'd think. Finishing his drink, he set it aside. I'm gonna go get some air, but it was nice talking to you. I'll be back shortly. Go O's, he added and raised a fist as he made his way toward the door. Didn't get your name, the bartender called after him, but Drake pretended not to hear him and pushed his way into the cooling night. He checked the time again, after 9 o'clock now, and still no sign of the professor. Dr. Fox's number was still in his phone, but instead of calling, he took out a cigarette and lit it. Maybe he should have felt more urgency than he did, with the monster on the loose, a cryptic physics professor MIA, and several people in varying degrees of danger. Had the monster gone for Fox, gone after him for what he might know? Competent as the professor seemed in his office, Drake didn't like his odds against the man who stalked James. He asked James and Claire to send periodic texts confirming their safety, so he wasn't worried about them for the time being. No one knew where Michael and Rebecca were, which made them just as safe. He still blamed himself for what happened to Mike, though he hadn't admitted that to anyone. The first time he visited to see what he could find out about Claire or if her father's connection to the events, he made no attempt to travel covertly. If the monster knew all of James' movements, he surely could have tracked him to Drake's office and followed Drake to get to Claire's parents. It wasn't the only possible explanation, but it was the one Occam would have favored. Which led to another question. How long before Drake himself was added to the man's list, he wondered, or was he already on it? All these considerations, these 1,000 possible ways everything could go against him. But in the cool of the dark, breathing out a trail of gray smoke, he felt immune. His needle had been pushed into the red over the last few days, but then a curious thing happened. After the dial moved through caution and past extreme danger, it settled in an area of calm. Maybe it was emotional surrender, or the feeling that things couldn't keep getting worse forever, but he wasn't afraid of the future, or for the future. What would be, and rather than punch himself ragged trying to fight that, he assented. He would do what he could, everything he could, and he would succeed or fail. The end result, which he could not control, became less important than how he got there, which he could. At least that's what he was telling himself when a silver hatchback came along, kicking up dust, and pulled into the parking lot of the Blue Valentine. Drake and Fox settled into a back booth, as far from the bar as they could. Not that the other patrons' actions suggested they were interested in anything other than the baseball game and their own conversation. Drake had another double white horse in front of him. His companion nursed a pint of beer. Where would you like to start? Drake asked. You said Claire is in danger. Serious danger, wasn't it? I did. Start with that. How did you get tied into this, and what have you learned? Drake took a slow drink to let the question hang in the air. When he was finished, he said, Who is Steve Upshaw? Steve? Who cares about Steve? You said the young lady is in danger. That's the priority. We start there. Drake looked away from Fox, slowly, and made a production of picking the drink back up. He met his eyes and raised his glass. I've got all night. Now look here. Fox rested his palms on the table. You show up at my office, give me a fake name, start asking personal questions about my student, and expect to dictate terms to me? You're dreaming, sir. Don't tell me my business and I won't tell you yours, Drake snapped. We're done lying to each other. We have to be for Claire's sake. He leaned forward. You want to protect the girl, you'd better wrap that brilliant brain of yours around three simple truths. Claire's in trouble. I'm the best chance of getting her out of it. And the longer you hold on to your pride or whatever it is you think this posturing is accomplishing, the worse it is for her. Do you understand that? Or do you need a few more diplomas on your wall? You know, we typically call them degrees at the post-secondary level, Dr. Fox said kindly. The remark abated Drake's anger. Well, there you go. He threw a hand up. Stepped out of my element and made a damn fool of myself. Not for the first time. You stop trying to play the tough guy and I won't try to accelerate any particles. I promise that's going to be best for everyone. Drake looked around to see if their rising voices had attracted any unwanted attention, but they were as invisible as ever. I won't betray her confidence. Who's Steve Upshaw? Fox looked down into his beer and let out a breath. That's what I don't understand, Mr. Drake. He laughed softly. One of the things. We're done lying, right? On my word. And you said her boyfriend hired you? Yes. But Steve is her boyfriend. Drake swirled the drink in his glass, but had otherwise lost interest in it. That's what Dr. Beaumont said, too. Have you met Steve? No, Dr. Fox said. But why would I have? I didn't find anything strange about that. Nor should you have, Drake agreed. But I have met her boyfriend, spent time with both of them and her parents. He hesitated before continuing with the last part, but felt it was important that both he and the doctor share full truths. His name is James Chandler. So why are you all talking about Steve Upshaw? I don't know any James Chandler, but she provided the name herself. There can be no mistake there. He sat in silence and mulled the problem over. You haven't asked her about it? No. I haven't seen her or James since Dr. Beaumont called me, which led me to your office, which led me here. If the time comes to ask that question, I'll do it in person. Well, Dr. Fox said, I won't tell you your business. Sometimes a little subtlety goes a long way, Doc, Drake said, but he had to admit it was a valid point. Two possibilities, then, he posited. Either she's got a guy on the side, and who am I to judge, or James Chandler and Steve Upshaw are one and the same. She's too kind-hearted for that, Dr. Fox said. The first one, I mean. That's not her. You think this James could have given you a fake name? Drake shook his head. Her parents know him by that name, and his job does too. If that's his con, he's been awfully thorough. And then there's the fact that it doesn't make any sense, does it? Not that I can see. But it's not my business, is it? Fox had finished his beer. Yeah. Take it easy, Doc. Fox smiled. Can I get you another drink? Damn right you're paying after that crack. Double, top shelf, Drake said, and downed what was left in the glass in one go. He watched Fox leave the table and turned over the possibilities in his head. He didn't much like either of the explanations he suggested, unless there was no Steve Upshaw, and Claire invented the name for reasons that weren't clear. That fit more with her character, independent, creative, forward-thinking. But it didn't help him answer the question of motive, not yet, anyway. Fox returned with 2 drinks. Cheapest stuff they had, he said, sliding Drake's glass across the table. Hoped he wouldn't notice the difference. Well, I will now. And ice. You couldn't have messed this up more if you tried. The night is young, Fox said and toasted. I answered your questions. Are you ready to answer mine? On the television, the baseball game ended in an Orioles loss. Fred and Terry got up from their stools and said their goodbyes to Danny at the bar. Getting ready to close it up, boys, Danny called out across the room. 2 men in the corner booth ignored him. He was content to let them carry on as he packed up the place for the night. The whiskey was cold in Drake's throat, and it followed gravity downward to cool his stomach. He thought of the calm he had felt outside the Blue Valentine and tried to summon its return. Shoot. What danger is Claire in? Dr. Fox asked. There's a man. At least we think he's a man. Drake laughed at himself. We've taken to calling him the monster. You have monsters in science, right? You remember Frankenstein, Doc? They brought him to life with lightning. I've read it, yes. That's science fiction, you understand. We don't sew body parts together and bring them to life, with lightning or otherwise. Drake nodded and felt the room tilt around him. Not yet. He laughed again. Tell me about the monster. The monster. Wait, there's a man. And I know he's a man, but you can call him a monster if you want. He gestured with his drink hand. I won't stop you. There is a man called Michael Ventura, and in the past he did some bad things. He forced himself to slow down. Suffice to say, doctor, some very bad things. And he married a stunner, and they had a daughter. And they named her, Drake pointed at Fox like an overly enthusiastic conductor, Claire. And they named her Claire, he confirmed. And she grew older, as children do. And somewhere along the line, she met James Chandler. And the two of them, he clapped his hands together. Okay? Fast forward to about a week ago. Michael, whatever, calls me up and says he has a job for me. Now, we've hardly spoken in years. No Christmas cards, Doc. But Mike, for all his faults, he remembers the old days. And by God, he remembers Victor Drake. So when his little girl comes to him looking for help, he comes to, he pointed at himself, Victor Drake, the one and only. And the price is right, and it's what I do, so why not? So James comes to me and tells me the story of this monster who showed up at his work, threatened him, and then at his house with more of the same. And now this man, monster if you like, has expanded his target to Claire. Is that the long and short of it? That's certainly the short of it. Drake finished his third drink and set it on the table gracelessly. The long of it involves superhuman abilities, a seriously injured old woman, a crippled father, and a collision course with the unknown. He lifted his head and looked at the professor with eyes like graves. We're leading to something, Doc. I don't know what. Fox stayed quiet until Drake spoke again. Finally, he said, What do you make of it? The professor's face was reposed in deep thought, as Drake imagined it must be when he was poring over some especially difficult equation. He had the pieces, but could not quite connect them. When he finally spoke, his tone was shaken. When did you say this monster showed up? About a week ago. Pay attention. Dr. Fox pressed him. Surely you have the exact date. He should have known that. Maybe he did when he walked into the bar earlier that evening, but he didn't now. It's in my papers, Drake said. In my notes at the office. Sure. At the bar, Danny turned out most of the lights, now came over and rapped his knuckles on the table. Appreciate you gentlemen coming out tonight. I gotta get home to bed. We open 3 o'clock tomorrow if you want to come back. I need the date, Drake. That face that had alternated between congenial, annoyed, and perplexed was now scared. The date the monster came to the gym. The bar had been dark enough, but outside was solid black, except for a couple far-off streetlights hanging over the road. Drake waved his hand as they left, Danny locking the door behind them. You're a man of science. Drop the monster stuff. He, is a man. He fumbled in his pocket for his keys, but stopped when an unknown figure stepped into his peripheral vision. No, it said in a voice like sandpaper. The alcohol slowed Drake's reflexes, and it felt like a tremendous labor to turn his head in the direction of the voice. His senses were blunted, and he reacted to what he found there with a passive sort of placidity. It was James's visitor, all right. No questioning the veracity of his description. Drake stood in the cool of the night and regarded those sunken eyes, profoundly unsure what he saw in them. A moment was all he had, because before he could open his mouth to speak, the figure before him changed. Too dark to see the finer details of the transformation process, he heard a chilling guttural sound. What stood in its place an instant later was enough to break his insistence on using the word man. From now on, no question, it was a monster. At 6'4", Drake had to crane his neck upwards to take in the full scope of the beast, well north of 7 feet tall, with hands that looked like they could palm boulders. On the end of them, claws sharp as concertina wire. It was thin but unmistakably powerful. Its eyes shone black, making the darkness around them seem washed out in comparison. Drake's first instinct was to reach inside his coat for his gun, but his usually dexterous hands were sluggish and clumsy. He couldn't grab it cleanly. The creature took one elongated step and swung its left arm, batting its adversary aside as though he were weightless. Drake flew backward into the front passenger side door of the car, landing sideways, indenting the panel with a dull thud. Trying to press himself up on his elbow, he found his body insubordinate. Instead, he could only lay his head in the dirt, helpless to stop whatever was going to happen next. The lights in the bar were off now, but Drake counted on Danny still being inside. The best place for him. Even if he came out with the shotgun firing, it might not have been enough. No reason for an innocent old man to get caught up in the carnage. 911, Drake yelled. Danny, 911. The monster turned its head at Drake's shouting, but regarded him uninterestedly, like a dog that has grown tired of its bone. Instead, it pivoted to Dr. Fox, who watched the scene in frozen wonder. He stepped back until there was no more room to retreat. The monster approached him, studied him quizzically. It can't be. His voice broke the spell, and the monster pounced, a bolt from the blue. An arm's length away now, it towered over the professor and stared down at him, unspeaking. Eyes trained on Dr. Fox, it tilted its head, confused as to what it saw. His mouth was open and trembling, but no words came out. The beast reached out a massive hand, put its fingers on either side of the doctor's throat. Not squeezing, no pressure, but enough that Fox wasn't going anywhere before it wanted him to. Lying in the dirt, Drake had been angling his arm toward the gun, was finally able to free it from his holster. He pointed it at the monster and yelled, "Hey!" His chest cried out in pain. Broken rib, maybe. Rather than speak again, he raised the gun, unsure if it would mean anything or if a bullet would even do anything, but thankful to have the option. The monster locked its attention on Drake, and the eye contact made him wince. A color past blackness, those two eyes, something found only in the deepest reaches of space, never seen on Earth in such raw, unadulterated form until now. He kept the gun up, finger on the trigger, but didn't fire it. Again, it tilted its head, not understanding, seemingly trying to. It gave up and faced Dr. Fox, this time closing its hand and lifting him off the ground. The monster leaned forward, eye to eye now, sulfuric breath filling its senses. Drake angled his gun upward and pulled the trigger, zipping a warning shot over the creature's head. It didn't react. He fired a second shot, closer this time. "Don't shoot," Fox looked at him between gasping breaths. Drake could tell the professor's cadence. He was getting close to passing out from lack of oxygen. The creature howled out and flexed the muscles on its hand till they stood out like steel cables. Drake fired again, at it this time, but between the awkward angle and his exhausted arm, the shot missed badly. Red and blue flashes were visible intermittently in the night sky. The sirens were strong now. The monster saw them too and let Fox drop to the ground. Still breathing, Drake thought, but in the darkness he couldn't be sure. He stayed conscious long enough to watch the monster cradle Fox in its expansive arms and disappear into the trees. End of the chapter.
It's fantastic. Oh my gosh. Okay. I have to go buy that book.
Thank you.
So I just love the voicing in this piece. You have such very distinctive dialogue for each of your characters.
Thank you.
Your detective is definitely noir inspired. I mean, I'm getting that whole fedora hat thing going
Yeah,
on.
for sure.
It's really, really fun. It's super fun. So when you were writing this, was that something you were really conscious of? Did you go back and look at old films and old comic books or whatever to find that cadence of dialogue, or did that come really naturally to you?
I think a little of both. You know, I've like you mentioned, movies as well. I've read so much and watched so much of that stuff that that character actually shows up a few chapters into the book. I think it's chapter 6 when the detective shows up, and really from the first scene, it was there's Pilot. If you can
Tell
hear,
Pilot we said hi.
there's Pilot. Yeah. Some characters it takes a while to get to know to kind of hear their voice, so to speak. But with that one, it was pretty immediate from the first meeting. You know,
That
very
is
much
very,
like I
very
said,
cool.
that yeah, kind of that Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade, you know,
Yeah,
like
that it had a real
inspiration.
Sam Spade kind of feel to it. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, love those characters.
So I like to ask every new author that I encounter, because this is the great debate: are you a pantser or a plotter?
Oh, Panther all the way. Um,
You
the
don't even start with a sketch of an outline, you just get an idea and start
yeah,
writing?
yeah. I mean, the first scene of this book, I had no idea where it was going. It was probably I was probably 3 chapters into it before I was like, you know, maybe we could get a private eye involved.
That's fun.
That's kind of how Drake gets involved. You know, this man monster, as you can see, it kind of straddles the line, but shows up, and he's got some mob associations from his earlier checkered past kind of
You
days,
would kind of have to with that voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So he gets tied into this thing, of course, not knowing what he's getting himself into at the time.
And you didn't either, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's the funny thing about it. I sort of have to solve the mystery for myself of like, I don't start with an end in mind or anything. So it's like,
That's great. Fantastic. I belong to a big community here in Michigan, and the writers, I am outnumbered. I am a passionate plotter, and the majority of
okay.
the writers I encounter are pantsers, and I don't understand how your brain works, but
Well,
that's okay.
likewise, yeah,
I
the
mean,
plotting impresses me.
yeah.
I I just got to figure it out kind of scene by scene. And then
Yeah.
you can go back and be like, okay, I said this in chapter 20, so let me kind of
Yeah,
plan.
for me, it's kind of like the comparison of chaos and controlled chaos. And
Sure.
I prefer the controlled chaos.
Yeah, it might be
Thank
that.
you so much for coming on the
Thanks for
program,
having me.
Adam. It
Yeah, this
was
is
just a
great.
delight to hear you tell your story, and I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing.
Much appreciated.
Thank you so much. And one last question before you go. Do you have anything else coming up on the horizon for us?
I do, yeah. The next book will be out in January. Just kind of making the finishing touches. The final draft is final and everything.
Same genre?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So it's almost it's still a detective story, but I wanted to do a lot of things differently. So it's first person, and instead of the gruff, competent, experienced detective, the detective in the new book, he's kind of a goof.
Very
He
fun.
he doesn't have any experience. He doesn't really know what he's doing. So it's closer to the comedy side, where this is, maybe more the Stephen King horror
It's really
type of
fun
vibe.
to play with those different things, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm sure
yeah,
you talk about that with your students all the time. Try different
right.
things, see what you like. It's kind of, I tell everybody it's kind of like ice cream. You have to try all of them before you can pick a favorite.
Yeah, exactly. It was a nice change of pace after this one.
Awesome. Well, we will look forward to seeing that. And when it releases, please come back and read for us
Oh,
again.
I would love to. Yeah, for
Awesome.
sure.
I hope you have a great day and enjoy Lake Superior.
For sure. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.